Welcome everyone to today's CSIA webinar, Control System Integration Segment, Mergers and Acquisitions Market Update. My name is Colin Hammond and I will be your host today. For those of you who are unfamiliar with CSIA, we are a global nonprofit professional association with over 500 member companies in 40 countries. Our mission is to advance the practice of control system integration to benefit our members and their clients. Our vision is to ensure that manufacturing and process industries everywhere have access to low-risk, safe, and successful application of automation technology. CSIA membership offers members access to resources needed to attain and exceed business goals. To highlight just a few of our many member benefits, the CSIA Best Practices Manual guides control system integration companies in the setup and running of a solid company. CSIA's Business Insurance Program offers members an excellent insurance program for business owners, subcontractors, and more. The program includes members from all over the world enjoying the peace of mind that comes with CSIA insurance. Clients in all industries are now seeking integrators with a CSIA certification alongside ISO. They recognize CSIA certified integrators' commitment to industry standards and business acumen. As a result, being certified can shorten the sales cycle. CSIA Industrial Automation Exchange is the premier automation guide featuring system integrators and suppliers who provide industrial, manufacturing, and process automation solutions. For integrators and suppliers, it's a place to market their expertise. Clients will find white papers, case studies, capabilities, contact information, and engage with conversation directly with CSIA members. Please follow CSIA's online events calendars for all upcoming webinars, including both partner webinars and business webinars. CSIA's business webinars features topics handpicked by CSIA leadership to help you run your business. CSIA partner webinars are opportunities given to CSIA's industry partners to address hot topics and demonstrate their expertise. You won't want to miss these opportunities to learn from the comfort of your own office or home. And for more information about CSIA, please visit our website or contact us at info@staff.controlsys.org or 847-686-2245. And at this time, I would like to introduce our presenter. Clint Bundy is Managing Director of Bundy Group, a boutique investment bank with offices in North Carolina, New York, and Virginia. Bundy Group specializes in representing business owners and management teams in business sales, capital raises, and acquisitions. Clint and the Bundy Group team have over a decade of experience in the control and automation space, including numerous successfully closed client transactions in the industry. Furthermore, Bundy Group's affiliation with CSIA goes back many years. Clint has been a regular speaker and writer for controls and automation events and publications, and we are excited to have him speak this morning. So with that, I will now turn it over to our distinguished presenter. Welcome, Clint.
Colin, thank you very much, and appreciate the CSI organization, which has, again, been a key partner of Bundy Groups for some time, allowing us to speak today. I'm looking forward to talking through what I hope are some important and relevant topics for the attendees on the call today, including and especially any business owners who are on the call. We certainly want to make this productive as possible, and I am reserving time at the back end of this presentation to answer any questions that the audience may have. I will give everyone a heads up in advance that I'm finishing up on a downslope of a cold here, so if for some reason any of my points that I walk through today aren't very clear, then feel free to clarify the point in the audience chat or question buttons that you have available, or certainly email or call me offline to further discuss. Let's jump into the presentation. And my first goal is to really just get everyone comfortable with who we are, because that then helps set a framework for our knowledge around the topics that we're going to talk around today. Bundy Group, as Colin mentioned, has offices in New York, North Carolina, which is my location, and in Virginia. We work nationally and internationally, and we have a quality team that is highly focused on serving clients in the controls and automation space. Our team has a nice blend of corporate investment banking, operational leadership, and technology roles, which we think helps us serve our clients in the utmost fashion. As Colin also mentioned, we have a strong track record in the controls and automation space, really going back a decade or more now. We enjoy the market, the growth that's occurring with it. We really enjoy the owners that we have relationships with and we work with in the space. And we certainly appreciate, again, our partnership that we've got with CSIA over the years to help us further our efforts in the industry. As you'll see in the bottom half of this slide, there are numerous publications that we've been involved with, as well as associations where we've been a speaker at. You'll see the Rockwell Automation Fair is mentioned as one of those events that we're a regular attendee at. And we will be at next week's conference in Chicago. And if any of you are going to be in attendance at the Rockwell Automation Fair and have a few minutes to meet for a coffee, then certainly please let me know. We enjoy meeting with owners at that industry conference. But I do want to reiterate again our gratitude to the CSIA team for allowing us to speak today. So jumping into what we call both industry observations and strategic options available to owners, this kind of tees us up for what we feel are very key components for owners to understand as they're running and growing and building value in their business, whether or not they're seeking a sale one day or not. But as a first starting point, we wanted to give what we always like to tell to owners is a strategic options available to them really at any given point in time. And I'm going to kind of work from the top, and then is our first starting point, which is your first strategic option is certainly status quo, which is you continue to execute on your current operating plan, you maintain your existing ownership structure, you seek ways to continue to grow and to build value. And certainly for many owners, maybe even most owners out there, this is the suggested route to pursue for the short, medium, and maybe even long term. I'm going to go to the very bottom now, talk about the second bucket that we see as an option to business owners, and that's what we call recapitalization. And a recapitalization can mean when a business owner or a company elects to bring in capital to accomplish what could be one of several different objectives. It could be many different objectives. It could be capital that's brought in to fund new growth. It could be capital that's used for owners to pay themselves dividends. It could be capital that's used to buy out other shareholders. It could be to refinance existing debt. Again, there are many, many reasons that an owner would bring in capital, but the key thing to understand in sort of our view of this option is that traditionally in this kind of recapitalization structure, the owners would be looking to not give up majority equity control of their business. In order to accomplish that, they would use, it could be debt financing, or it could be a combination of debt and minority equity capital to pursue these initiatives, again, with the end goal of ultimately not giving up majority equity control in the company, which for some owners is very key to them. Now working in the middle box, and this is where we're going to really spend the bulk of our time today talking around what I frame up as divestiture options or sale options. And there are two main key routes in today's environment to most business owners, including within the CSIA space, for selling their company. And the first option is what we call sale to a strategic. Now, what's a strategic? Well, a strategic could be another industry participant, like another system integrator. It could be a supplier. It could be a customer. It could be another operating company that's in a sister industry that wants to get into the system integration space. I mean, there really can be a number of different definitions of what falls within a strategic, but it is, at the end of the day, a current sort of industry player in some framework. What we do see, by the way, is in our experience and from the data that we have access to is roughly, call it 70 to 80% of all M&A transactions that occur are to a strategic buyer. So it's always very important to have a good handle on, in any industry, who are the active strategic buyers that are completing acquisitions. The next option you see here are what we call private equity group and management-led buyout. Now, I'm going to take some time here to explain private equity groups because my guess is most of the audience members on the phone have some familiarity with private equity groups. Probably many of you are getting calls by them pretty periodically. There are thousands of private equity groups out there today. They're actively looking for investments, most especially within the controls and automation space. So, what is a private equity group? Well, a private equity group is effectively a private investment fund that gets its capital from pensions, university endowments, high net worth individuals, current and prior business owners. Could be a myriad of kind of sources. But what these capital sources are doing are providing the money to the operators of the fund, which are they're called the general partners. And then the fund is turning around and investing in privately held businesses, almost always acquiring a majority equity stake in a company, but leaving a minority equity stake with existing ownership and or management. So the goal being is that the investment group, the private equity fund, doesn't want to come in and operate the business. What they want to do is come in and invest and align themselves with management to grow the company. And the first investment that occurs within an industry for a private equity group is called a platform investment. And without putting too fine a number on it, usually a platform investment for most private equity groups is going to be probably a minimum of 15 or 20 million in revenue, although there could be exceptions to that. And the goal is for over the next usually 3 to 7 years, the private equity group and the management team of the company will work to grow that platform investment by two means. One, organically, and the second is by completing what we call add-on or tuck-in acquisitions. And the tuck-in acquisition strategy is very, very common for private equity groups. So there are going to be many system integration companies out there who are not platform candidates, but they are candidates for to receive a add-on or tuck-in acquisition. So that is at a high level what the private equity strategy is. Private equity groups are very return focused. They're very focused on driving growth so that at the end of the day, they can return that capital to their limited partners, who are the pension funds, the university endowments, and of course also earn themselves a handsome profit in the what we call the carry, which is the term used in the private equity industry. So, one, just as a kind of loose guidance to provide to the audience here, is that private equity groups are usually looking to make on any investment a 3 times cash on cash return. So that means if the private equity group puts $100 million into a platform investment, they're looking to get back at the end of the day, $300 million to $600 million in capital back, equity capital back. So that's, again, just a loose parameter. But I wanted to, again, spend some real time on this to make sure everybody has a good understanding of private equity, because I think there's a lot of misinformation out there and confusion about it. And certainly I'm happy to answer any follow-up questions that you all may have. Where are we today with the controls and automation market? And where is the industry just in terms of from a profile of growth and what have you? And in short, it's a very attractive growth market, which many of you already know. The industrial automation market is expected to grow from $183 billion in 2015 to $352 billion by 2024. Now that's a pretty astounding growth rate. And I am referring to the overall industrial automation market, which of course within that is the control system integration market, but the system integration market very much piggybacks on those growth statistics. In this chart that you'll see here in the bottom right, there's also some interesting statistics that are provided from a Bain & Company report from last year about the IoT and analytics market, which is, in my view, a more even comprehensive view of the controls automation market. The IoT market and analytics market is a $520 billion market by 2021, according to Bain. And if you look at this second quote that I've got at the top here, the acquisition and installation of a control system represents half of the total cost of the system during its lifetime. Well, that directly impacts the system integration market, and I feel plays very handsomely into what the system integrators are doing and the value-added services that they're providing. So I just thought those were some interesting statistics for each of you as audience members to be aware of. And what are the growth drivers that we're seeing of this growth within just the overall controls and automation market, which again also are key drivers within the system integration segment? Certainly the increasing adoption of the Internet of Things technologies. I don't even think we've frankly touched the tip of the iceberg there, and there's a lot of exciting developments that are going to continue to occur and growth. Certainly government, environmental, and cybersecurity is a major driver. I mean, cybersecurity, which we view as kind of a subset of or kissing cousin of the controls market, we're seeing cybersecurity is going to increase at about a 14.5% compounded annual growth rate from just about $17 billion in 2017 from $17 billion a few years ago to $6 billion in 2022. So you're just going to see a massive growth there within cybersecurity at a 14.3% growth rate, and we think that plays very well into the system integration segment. And finally, just some other couple points here. You're seeing a continued focus on businesses on leveraging controls and automation platforms to increase productivity and profits, which certainly We think system integrators are on the front lines of those implementations. And then finally, these system integrators are really a valuable tool of helping to educate on the importance of automation technologies. And that is continue to be a key driver of growth within the overall controls and automation market. So just want to, again, give everyone an overview on how we see the market segment and key statistics today. How are the buyers, whether it be strategic or private equity, viewing this space? First, they view it as a growth industry, and we were just talking about that on the last page. They see the statistics, and they like to invest in growth. That's the easiest way for them to get their returns. What they're also saying is that there's a widening gap between larger, more sophisticated firms and smaller, less resourceful companies. And they see that as an opportunity in many respects, that they can go buy a larger, potentially more sophisticated firm as a platform and then turn around and go acquire tuck-in acquisitions, which will then provide synergies or combination benefits between the larger firms and the smaller tuck-ins. And that's a very, very common private equity playbook on obtaining those synergies. They certainly see the attractive client segments that many integration firms are working in, whether it be general industrial, power and utilities, food and beverage, pharma, even data centers. There are really just a lot of exciting developments going on in that kind of framework. And then certainly they're frankly paying a premium where those client markets are attractive enough, and there's enough of what we would call kind of recurring revenue type trends there, which I do want to make mention that buyers are, in this day and time, very heavily focused on the concept of recurring revenue, which means they effectively know at the beginning of a year where the revenue for a company will fall out over the next, call it, 12 to 24 months. And then finally, just the wave of investment. I mean, for lack of a better term, private equity groups are a little bit like sheep, and they all follow each other. Well, over the past 5 to 6 years, you've seen a tremendous wave of investment in not just the controls and automation space, but you've seen it in the control system integration space. So in effect, where you've got more strategic buyers and private equity buyers coming into a market, it just tends to snowball and attract more into the industry, which certainly then plays to the advantage of the system integrator owners, because the more demand for acquisitions creates a better valuation traditionally for most of the companies in the space. There are, again, the issues that private equity groups are having of finding enough platform investments. But the whole general theme would be is that for both platform candidates and for add-on candidates, there's just been an overwhelming surge of both strategic and private equity buyer activity, which plays to the advantage of the owners from a valuation and options point of view. Moving on to the next page, I want to talk just a little bit about a sample of the activity in the market today. And this is by no means a complete and comprehensive list. It is just an example of activity that we're seeing throughout the controls and automation, and especially the control system integration space. And I'm going to talk through kind of left to right, and then we'll work our way down some transactions to note. MedShift, which was a Bundy Group engagement, is a healthcare IoT analytics and equipment distribution firm that is headquartered in the Southeast but works internationally with physician practice groups. And that firm just received a capital placement from a bank, and that goes back to our earlier conversation about recapitalization as a strategic option available to business owners. LOFA Industries is a controls manufacturing firm headquartered in Atlanta. It was actually owned by a smaller private equity group with the management team owning a minority equity stake. And it was recently acquired by Harbor Group, which is a much larger private equity group headquartered in St. Louis. Many of you may have heard of the JR Automation transaction. I know there was a lot of communication and talk about the size of the deal and the buyer, which is Hitachi. JR Automation was owned by a private equity group who sold it and had a very, very handsome return. Pointing down to a few other, and I'd say one I would like to talk about here just for a second is e-technology groups, because I think that is a very traditional sort of private equity backed play that's occurring within e-technologies. About 3 years ago, e-technologies group received an investment from a private equity group headquartered out of Charlotte, North Carolina, called Falfurrias Capital. Falfurrias Capital bought a majority equity stake in e-technologies and then turned around and within about a year completed its first add-on acquisition in Glenmount Global Solutions, which was owned by another private equity group at the time. And then just within the past year, e-technologies, which again is backed by Falfurrias Capital, acquired Superior Controls, which many of you may know Superior Controls just through the extensive work they do in CSIA. And what you've seen there is that e-technologies, which was already a fairly sizable company before it acquired Glenmount Global and Superior Controls, now they've successfully added more capabilities in data centers, which is a huge focus of Glenmount Global, and they've built up their pharmaceutical system integration offerings via the Superior Controls deal. So all of that's happened within really about a 3-year time frame, and that is certainly a very common strategy of private equity groups. And then one or two other transactions just to flag to everybody here on the phone, which may be of interest, is in the bottom middle, you'll see Dorset Technologies, which this was a Bundy Group client in a transaction that happened just a few months ago. Dorset is a SCADA controls firm, was run by a very strong management team and continues to be run by a strong management team. They were partnered up with a private equity group and an operating executive with experience in the controls and energy sectors. And as a result of the transaction, the management team and the prior majority owner retain a significant amount of equity in the new Dorset company partnership with the private equity group. And now there's been an added senior team member who's been added to the team who, again, has a deep track record in the energy and control space. So that is, again, another traditional private equity transaction structure that you'll see, and their goal will be to grow Dorset over the coming years, both organically and through add-on acquisition. And then finally, on the bottom left is Ram Motors and Controls, another prior Bundy Group company, multiple locations throughout the Mid-Atlantic U.S. They were partnered up with Industrial Service Solutions, which is a platform investment for a private equity group based out of Chicago. So I always think it's helpful to talk in case studies, and hopefully just talking through some of these transactions to give you a flavor of the private equity as well as strategic buyer mix helps to give you an understanding of the really interesting activity occurring in the market today. Going to the next page here, I want to just talk through some specifics on strategic buyers active in the industry today. And there is a heavy focus on system integration companies and strategic buyers on this page. This is by no means a complete and total list of strategic buyers, but just some names to give you some color around. Eckhart, which is backed by a private equity group called LFM Capital, originally started in automotive a few years ago, but has now successfully expanded industries and capabilities through acquisitions. So it's now much more of an integrator than what originally started out as more of a controls manufacturing and robotics manufacturing firm. The Clark Companies, which is owned by Lightview Capital, is a private equity group. Clark Companies has a heavy focus on pharmaceutical, and the firm is, for the most part, a pure system integration company. Actimium is an international strategic that has already completed a couple of acquisitions in the U.S. and is very focused on and continuing to diversify into the U.S. Ferguson is another large strategic buyer who's really ramped up on becoming much more aggressive in its purchase of controls companies over the past, call it, 1 to 2 years. Shermco Industries. This is a firm that was originally in the electric motor repair space and electrical services space. It's now just gone to its second private equity group, and it is very focused on growing further into the control space, which is, again, another very interesting and common playbook where you're seeing companies that may be equipment repair companies or distribution firms, and they recognize the attractiveness of what can occur by going into the controls and control system integration space. So Shermco just closed on its first controls and automation transaction just really a few months ago. iAutomation is historically an automation distribution firm that is now really trying to enhance its system integration capabilities. And then you have SJE Rhombus, which is very focused on the water wastewater space, and has a very strong focus on controls, and is always very interested in increasing its control system integration capabilities. So again, just to give everyone a flavor for some of the active strategic buyers today. And then continuing on with that theme, I wanted to talk through just a few private equity groups who are either active today or would like to be in the control system integration space. Apex Partners, which is an international private equity group, is aggressively looking to expand into the industry with a platform investment. SFW Capital, whose sole focus as a private equity group is to invest in companies with instruments and controls capabilities, is very aggressively looking for ideally a control system integration platform. Sawmill Capital is the current owner of iAutomation. Lightview Capital, as mentioned earlier, owns Clark Companies. Winco Capital owns Alloy, which is a controls company. And all three of those firms not only are looking for add-on acquisitions, but would also consider other new platforms in the controls and automation space. JMC Capital is almost exclusively an IoT-focused controls and automation private equity group. And then you've got HCI Equity, which is a Washington, D.C. based private equity group that is certainly looking for a platform investment in the controls and automation space. So again, just some examples to provide, and certainly not a complete and total and finite list. Well, finally, kind of the last section here, and I think we're staying on time here, which is good, is talk through the process for exiting a business. Before we go through this timeline, let me just add, and what I say to every client at the beginning of every engagement is that every transaction takes its own twists and turns. Certainly part of our job, if we're hired by someone, is to manage the timeline and keep the momentum and the focus going so that a timeline doesn't get out of hand. But recognizing that, there certainly are twists and turns that can happen in every process timeline. We advise clients to allow 6 to 12 months to process and close a transaction, really from the date that they get started in earnest to the date a transaction closes. Traditionally, when we represent a client, we're going to work as if we're going to get it done in 6 months or less. Coming through sort of our business sale process page, and let me walk through this because there are a lot of moving parts here, but looking at the left side, you'll see where we talk about what we see as the business owner's role during the process of selling the company. First and foremost, we always remind our clients, keep focused on your business, because the last thing that we want in any process is the company to begin to suffer and not perform, because then that will create issues with getting a buyer to close the transaction. Certainly providing decisions at appropriate points of a process is certainly key. I mean, our client is the decision maker, and we'll give them our advice and thoughts, but it's the client's decision at these certain appropriate junctures on which direction to go. Using existing company resources, providing information and quality information is key. Ultimately, buyers will pay strong valuations and close transactions based due in no small part to the quality of the information. So I would always encourage all owners to make sure that you're keeping great books and records, that you keep good systems, that you can have talk in great detail and granularity about sales broken down by service line, sales broken down by client, margins broken down by those kind of categories, good information on your senior team members. So information is key. And then finally here on the business owner's role is make your senior management, and senior management, we leave that up to the ownership group to tell us who makes up senior management, but make them available for face-to-face meetings with potential buyers, which usually occurs in the management presentation part of the process, which we'll talk through here in a minute. What are the roles of the advisors that you'll have in a transaction? Investment banker, which is what Bundy Group again does. Our job is to run the process and drive the competitive process to obtain client optimal value and certainly help them find best fit. We also make recommendations on buyers to approach, timeline for the process, and possible transaction structures. The next one you'll see down here is, and the advisor is called a transaction accounting firm. But there's what we call in our industry, and buyers use this common vernacular too, is it's called a quality of earnings report, which is what a buyer usually will complete when they use their own transaction accounting firm to assess the attractiveness of a deal. And a quality of earnings report is effectively an audit on a company's financials and even to an extent the operations. We are in a habit now of often recommending to clients that they consider getting their own quality of earnings report completed before going to market to talk to buyers. And that just helps everyone, whether it be the client, a transaction accounting firm who completes it, a deal attorney, or the investment banking advisor, make sure that there's complete and total and utter confidence in the strength of the financial performance, because ultimately valuation will be underwritten on the financials of the company. And if the numbers end up being found to be incorrect at some point in the process, that it can change the deal structure and valuation or crater a deal, which nobody tends to be happy at that stage when that happens. You see that we have the M&A lawyer mentioned here. They are very much involved on negotiating key terms of the transaction. And then the M&A lawyer will be the one responsible for working with the client on negotiating and finalizing a purchase agreement. They'll be working directly with the buyer's M&A legal team. So it's always important to hire an experienced M&A lawyer. And then you'll see here at the bottom, we've got just sort of some boxes outlining from beginning to end the kind of key steps. First kind of step in the months 1 and 2 are usually the investment bankers running point on this, is conducting pre-diligence, which is our getting smarter, much smarter on the company, almost to the point that we can talk about a client's company as if it were our company. We draft, you need to draft marketing documents, which can be provided to buyers that educate them on everything from operations to key team members to client markets to growth opportunities. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to articulate potential growth opportunities to buyers, because ultimately it can be a great way to drive extra value if a client can articulate the new growth that a buyer can achieve if they buy that firm. And the goal is to ultimately contact the buyers, whether it be strategic and or private equity, get them under non-disclosure agreement, which protects the client and ensures that the market won't, or helps to ensure the market won't find out what is going on in terms of the sale, going to what we call first an indication of interest round, where buyers then provide, based off the information provided to that point, a preliminary offer giving general thoughts on value and structure and how they would finance a deal and key diligence items they still need, followed by what we then call, and after the client reviews the indications of interest and invites buyers to come to what we call management presentations. And those are usually held probably in the same town as the company's headquarters. Could be in a hotel conference room or in a lawyer's conference room. And it gives usually kind of call it a 3 to 5 hour window for each buyer to sit with the investment banking representative and the business owner and senior management team to talk through the company and the potential benefits of a combination with that buyer. Follow that by what we call the letter of intent round, which the letter of intent is the formal offers that are provided by buyers for the review of the sellers. And that's really at the stage where if everything's been positioned right to that point, it's a great opportunity for a seller and his advisors to drive extra valuation using that kind of competitive element, as I've referred to earlier, to increase and drive more value and hopefully better and even better fit for the seller. Once a client selects the letter of intent to sign, at that point, we move into due diligence, where the buyer really spends, call it anywhere from kind of a 45 to 90-day window looking under the covers and in the closet and in the front and the backyard to make sure there are no major issues with the company. There's nothing that they weren't made aware of. And also during that same time frame, the purchase agreement is being negotiated between the attorneys, and the key is getting a deal closed. So really, from the moment that we start in step one in the beginning to the very end, the key is drive competition and use momentum to your advantage, and try to give as much quality information as reasonably possible so that it minimizes the risks of a blown deal that would happen in kind of the latter phases. And of course, also helps us to drive extra valuation. So my only other comment I'd like to say, and I know a lot of owners get called by buyers all the time, and I frequently get the questions from the owners to me of, I'm not ready to have these kind of conversations yet, but should I talk to these buyers? And, you've got to sort of use your own judgment. I don't think it ever costs anything to talk, but my one piece of advice would be wary, because 1 or 2 conversations can quickly turn into 5 or 10, and that could come at a cost to you in terms of time and energy and frankly educating buyers about your business if you're not ready to have those conversations. So I would just always be very wary about ramping up on those conversations until you feel the timing is truly right. It's my 2 cents. So that is the final page here, and I did want to just kind of take a pause here. We may have 1 or 2 questions already, but I'll let Colin facilitate that. And And I'll take a pause there, Colin.
Thanks, Clint. Appreciate that. So we did have a question. We have, what is the approximate value of these purchases? And that came in at around slide, I believe it was slide 9 or 10.
Sure. I appreciate the question. I do many of these presentations every year, and I'm always disappointed if I don't get this question. So I appreciate the gentleman who asked this question putting it out there. I'm happy to give some guidance and thoughts, but let me give kind of a disclaimer statement first, which is, one, market value is ultimately driven by the competitive marketing of a business. So I could always tell any client on the front end my thoughts on their value ranges, but I'll also tell them we won't know for sure exact value and structure until we go through the process. Second is there are a lot of factors that drive the valuation of a firm. That could be everything from the size of the company, the client markets that it's active in, the historical growth, the profitability metrics, the depth of the team. I mean, one thing I'm hearing a lot of buyers talk about today is they're doing acquisitions as much to pick up new talent as they are for any reason, because as every owner on this phone knows, finding talent in this market is really difficult. So there really are a lot of factors that go into it, and for Bundy Group to provide thoughts to owners on this topic, we really have to get to learn more about each individual company. So that's sort of my overarching statement. Let me just give a little loose guidance on valuation multiples. Multiples in the control system integration space are tied around, and I think I just saw a question around methods of valuation, so I'm going to answer that question at the same time. The most common valuation method is to look at companies off of a transaction value to adjusted EBITDA multiple. So when we talk about adjusted EBITDA, what we're talking about is effectively the operating cash flow of a business. But we say adjusted because you add back to that operating cash flow or the EBITDA, you're adding back any one-time expenses or extraordinary expenses or owner-related expenses that won't continue after close. And EBITDA, for those of you who haven't heard the term before, stands for earnings before interest expense, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. So adjusted EBITDA, which is very critical in understanding for every company, there's a multiple that's applied to that to determine the final sort of, or at least the starting point for a valuation negotiation with a buyer. The general multiple ranges today in this industry are all over the map. And a lot of that's going to be tied to size and profit margins, but for larger platform candidates, it is not uncommon to see multiples get into the high, what we call single digits, so 8, 9 times or even higher. I could tell you that the JR Automation Hitachi deal traded for far above a 10 times EBITDA multiple, but that was also a very, very sizable company. For companies that are either smaller platform candidates or are tuck-in candidates, you still have a very wide range, and there are a lot of factors that go into where the landing spot could be. But I would say a range could go anywhere from 4 to 8 times. But that range could go wider both ways. So, for Bundy Group, usually when we're in early conversations with a potential client, we like to get to understand a company so that we can give a hopefully pretty accurate range read on each specific company on what we think reasonable valuations would be in a competitive process. So hopefully that helps to answer the questions there, but certainly follow up with questions where you have them.
Okay, thank you, Clint. So Looks like that was the last one. We do have a little bit more time. If anyone wants to ask any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A on the left-hand side. Are there any, I guess, questions that you commonly get, Clint, on this type of presentation?
You know, a lot of the questions that we get from owners who are either not going to be selling or recapitalizing their business anytime soon or ever, but they still like to have the feedback is what can they do to improve value? And we've touched upon this a little bit earlier, but some key things that I would always encourage owners to continue to do is build out strong management teams that go above and beyond you so that you can prove that you can go on that 3-week vacation to Italy and not have to take your phone, and the company will continue to perform very well. So building out key management and key talent is certainly critical. Always try to do your best to focus on driving profitable business. Just to give owners a general metric that we recommend they try to target is adjusted EBITDA margin, which is effectively taking your adjusted EBITDA and dividing it by your revenue that you generate. We recommend that owners target a minimum of 10% adjusted EBITDA margin percentages, and the further above 10% that a business can achieve, then the higher likelihood of getting a larger valuation. Now, for those owners who today aren't achieving 10% in adjusted EBITDA margins, all is not lost. So it's, you know, certainly we've had deals we've closed with companies that have had sub 10% adjusted EBITDA margins. So you can still get a deal done, but it just helps your valuation if you can be above 10% on adjusted EBITDA margins.
Okay, and then we have another one. How do you charge for your services?
Sure. So the typical investment banking structure is to, for lack of a better term, make our money when the client makes its money, and that will be at the close of a transaction, and we call those success fees. And what are the ranges of success fees? It really just depends on many factors, but the deal size and company size are a big determinant of that. We also charge what ends up being a fairly minimal monthly retainer, which we credit against a success fee. For our success fee pricing, we traditionally like to be aligned with the client in terms of we like to be incented to drive extra value. So it's not uncommon for us to get some kind of structure that incentivizes us or heavily incentivizes us to drive extra value for the client in a process. So I wanted to try to give as much guidance there, but it really becomes a case-by-case answer in terms of feedback.
Sure. Okay, and then we have what key risks apply to the valuation, and I think this will be the last one we'll take here.
Sure, and I like the term risk because that is risk is the right way to look at valuation, because ultimately buyers will pay premiums for companies that they view have low risk, and they will absolutely discount valuations for companies that they view have high risk. And so let's talk about some things that are effectively higher risk components in a company. High customer concentration is certainly one, and there are a lot of integrators that certainly have high customer concentration, which we understand, but I would generally say anything above kind of 25 or 30% of sales tied to one client can create more risk or potential risk in a negotiation with buyers. We've talked about the importance of profitable businesses. So if a company's significantly below that 10% adjusted EBITDA margin threshold, then buyers could determine that to be a high risk. If the business is effectively tied around one person in the key management ranks, i.e. the owner, well, there's a high risk there, and buyers will absolutely reflect that in evaluation, which is why we encourage owners to continue to build out the bench strength. Certainly if is one other risk factor to mention is if there is the client base that the integrator does work in is very one-time in nature. So it's, we as an integrator, we did work for these clients last year, and we're probably never going to work with them again or have the opportunity to work with them again. That would be a higher risk component from a buyer's point of view versus the integrator who says, we've got a great group of clients who we get done with one project, they just roll us right on to the next, or they just sign us under, even better if they sign us under multi-year contracts for projects and work. So certainly always do whatever you can to build towards that recurring revenue theme, which hopefully and will certainly decrease the risk element and increase the valuation potential. So all very good questions.
All right. Thank you, Clint. On behalf of CSIA, I would like to thank Clint for this informative discussion. I'd also like to thank all of those attending. We hope you found the webinar informational. And when you close out of the webinar, there will be a survey that'll pop up. If you could answer that, we would appreciate it. And we'd also like to remind you that a recording of this webinar will be available for viewing within 30 days of this event. Please visit the CSIA website to view this recording or a past webinar you have missed. And that concludes our program for today. Once again, thank you for joining us. Have a good afternoon, and thank you, Clint.
Thank you for the opportunity.